So today I wanted to just talk about my journey from musician to healthcare provider because they're like opposite extremes. So I started out in 5th grade when we're all asked what instrument we want to play. And back in the day, we were never offered strings. So I was between the flute and the clarinet. So I chose the flute. My dad was very thankful about that because he didn't want a squawking duck in the house. But I chose the flute, and I knew from the moment that I picked up that instrument that was what I was going to do with the rest of my life. It was just love at first sight. I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm going to do. So from 5th grade on, that's all I cared about. I was just going to play my flute. That's it. Didn't care about geometry or science or chemistry. When I got to high school, I'm like, what do I need this for? I'm going to be a musician. So I went on and I got my my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Flute Performance, and I studied with some really great people, and it was the best time. It was so much fun. And then I graduated and I did some freelance work, and I was teaching for a couple of years, and then I decided that I wanted to do studio work. So I was going to go out to California, because that was the place to go. I think it still is actually, to do studio work. I love soundtracks for animation and music, how they just combine those. It was just amazing. So that was my goal, is to go out and do studio work. I never wanted to be an orchestral player. Chamber music and studio work was kind of where my loves were. So I bumped up my playing quite a bit, and I was playing about 6 to 8 hours a day. And at the same time, I was helping a friend computerize their office. So I was doing that. I was working a lot of hours doing that because I was trying to save as much money as I possibly could. And sometimes you have to do multiple things as a musician when you're first starting out as well. So I was working at a desk that was completely ergonomically incorrect and horrible, and I was practicing 6 to 8 hours a day. So I had the perfect storm, and nobody had ever talked to me about ergonomics or body mechanics or anything like that. It wasn't really a thing back when I was a student, and our music teachers who are professional musicians, that's not their area of expertise. That's not what they go to school for. They don't learn about anatomy and kinesiology and body mechanics and all that stuff. I never learned about that stuff when I got my music degree. So it's not something you really have an awareness of as a musician, but super important to have awareness of. So that's kind of why I'm hoping to reach as many people as possible, because the more awareness you have of what your body's doing at your instrument, the more you will be able to prevent things. So long story short, I ended up with injuries. I had a lot of issues in my shoulder. I had numbness and tingling down into my hand. I had really bad wrist pain and an issue with my little finger, to the point where I couldn't keep my little finger. I couldn't move. My finger would lock on my E flat key, for all of you flute players out there. And that's really important. If you can't move your finger off of your E flat key, you're kind of have a problem. So I started my journey into the healthcare field as a patient, and a patient that didn't have any knowledge of what healthcare was really like. So I ended up seeing a couple people in my state, didn't have any improvement. So I found a fairly well-renowned orthopedic doc in Manhattan that I went to go see, who supposedly specialized in working with musicians. So I went to go see him, and healthcare, sometimes you gotta love it. It will drive you crazy. But I travel all this way into New York City to see this surgeon, and I'm scared, and I'm petrified, because I just want to play and I want answers. I need to know what I can do so that I can continue playing and make everything better. And I have my list. So I walk in of my questions, and he takes me in, and he sees that I have a list of questions, and he rolls his eyes. All right. Now, again, as a younger person and as a patient who's scared to death, that's not really the best thing that you want to see, because you're like, oh, well, what's wrong? I have a list of questions. It wasn't like a mile long. It was just a few questions. And so he's evaluating me. He brings in then all these residents, and they're poking on me, and they're like, ooh, 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 ooh. Never once tell me what's going on. Never once tell me what they're looking at. And I, again, didn't know to advocate for myself and say, hey, what are you talking about? Why are you looking at that? I was too scared and too paralyzed by my ability inability to play my instrument. So the long story is that he didn't give me anything other than tell me to rest and to go see this hand therapist. So it didn't give me, didn't explain anything to me, didn't say this is what you need to do, A, B, or C, no diagnoses, just told me to rest. As a musician, the worst thing anybody can ever say to you is to rest. That's not what you want to hear. That's not what you want to hear. I had already been resting because I couldn't play. So don't tell me to rest. I want to be able to play. So I go and I see a hand therapist who supposedly specialized in musicians. And she made me a splint for my little finger to try and help it keep it in a position. But then that was it. Nobody looked at me while I was playing. Nobody ever looked at my posture. Nobody ever talked to me about body mechanics or ergonomics. Nobody ever talked to me about what other things I might be doing in my life that may be contributing factors to my symptoms. Nobody ever talked to me about my mindset or my stress level or my physical activity level all of those things could be contributing factors to what may be going on. So that was really frustrating for me because here I am, I'm thinking I'm finding these people that are specialists in this area, and they may work with musicians, but they didn't get musicians. They didn't understand what it was like to be a musician, the lifestyle of a musician, the passion and the dedication and the fear that comes up when you even think about being injured or you are injured. So that was very disappointing for me as a patient. And now when I look back on it as a healthcare provider, I realize all the things that really could have been done better, and they could have just spent the time to get to know me and understand what was going on. And why it was so important for me. So I ended up then trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life after not having any other ideas at all. F. Scott, you're watching again. Hi. I screwed up the video the first time. It was crooked. So hopefully I'm not crooked now. I checked it on my computer, so hopefully it's all good. So I decided I had to figure out what I was going to do, and I had no idea. So my grandmother suggested that I go into physical therapy, and I was like, you're crazy. I'm not touching feet. There's no way I'm going to touch a foot. That's disgusting. There's no way. And I was like, I don't know anything about how am I going to get through science classes and math classes. I hated those when I was in high school. So I applied. I was like, all right, well, I think it's kind of interesting. I found OT, and OT is all about mind, body, spirit, and function. So I thought that was, kind of in alignment with what I wanted to do. And I knew I really wanted to help other musicians at some point in my career, so that they didn't have to go through what I had just been through. So I applied to OT school, and I got in, and everything just sort of fell into place. And they wouldn't take orchestra for physics. I couldn't quite figure out why. And they wouldn't take, they did take, I think, my music history for a history class. So I got away with a couple of those. But, I had no academic classes at a conservatory. So it was, I essentially started all over again. So then I spent about 17 years working in an orthopedic clinic. And now I am out on my own, and I have my own clinic, and I'm really able to focus on musicians now, and see people one-on-one and focus on all the things that nobody ever looked at me with when I was a musician with an injury. So my goal is to really look at musicians, every little aspect of their life that may be contributing factors of what's going on with them, and to prevent an injury. So you may not be having symptoms now, but there may be things that you're doing while you're playing or in other areas in your life that may be contributing factors and setting you up for potential injury at some point in time later on down the line. So obviously our goal as musicians is to have a long career and play our instruments for as long as we possibly can. So you have to be healthy. You have to take care of yourself. And, that includes, kind of thinking like an athlete. So, athletes don't just go out on the field and play. They do a warm-up, right? They prep their muscles. You as a musician need to prep your muscles before you sit down and play. And that doesn't mean playing scales and arpeggios. That means doing a physical warm-up before you actually do that. And I'll talk more about this in some of my tips and kind of go into more detail about this. And then you need to take care of your body after you've played. So you're taking your body and you're putting it into a contorted position, depending on your instrument. every instrument you have to contort your body to play. There's not one that's ergonomically correct. And you have to contort yourself, and you're playing under very intense circumstances, and you're really doing finite control, very fine motor control, and you're asking a lot of it, and you're probably not taking care of it. I know I never did. Exercise was never really a big thing. I think I went and I exercised once with my roommate from college. I ran. I couldn't walk for 4 days afterwards, I think. So, but again, it's one of those things you have to be taking care of yourself wholly and holistically. So prevention is a key, longevity is a key, and really looking at little things that you're doing that may be contributing factors. And as I said to one of my patients today, it's, what you're doing today. And as we tweak things in 5 years, you may need to tweak things a little bit again, but the key is awareness and starting to be aware of what your body is doing in certain situations and what is supposed to work and how your body's supposed to work at your instrument. And for every person, it's different. So it's not a one size fits all by any stretch of the imagination. So my goal for this group is to really talk about all these things, get people to start having conversations and to drop some tips and some education in here so that nobody will have to go through kind of what I went through. So that I can hopefully be a resource for people, so that if they do have issues, they can kind of, I can help them along their path and, ultimately prevent things in the first place.